Kia ora, good evening. Solid Energy has announced it intends to cut further jobs and plans to sell its Fonterra lignite plant. 105 corporate and support jobs will go under the company's latest restructure proposal, which affects roles based in or reporting into its Christchurch office, cut by just under half from 234 to 129 positions. This would affect 52 jobs in Christchurch and 53 at regional sites. It's not known if any of these would be in Southland. Chairman Mark Ford says the company intends to sell non-core assets, including its briquette plant. Gore District Mayor Tracy Hicks says the news is not surprising, given the challenges facing the company. The recent effects of the dry are hitting home for dairy giant Fonterra, with milk volumes dropping on the back of the country's most widespread drought in 3 decades. With only 1 month left in the season, milk collection's down 5%, and for the month of April it's down 34% on April 2012. Production in the North Island fell 5.2%, but the South Island saw a rise of 8.2%. Fonterra increased its forecast payout in March on the back of high global prices and in anticipation of production being comparable with last season. But with dry conditions and rain arriving too late, many farmers have been forced to dry off cows early. Invercargill is likely to breach air quality standards again this year, with air pollution having already risen above acceptable levels once ahead of winter. On Monday, air quality in Invercargill was above the allowable limit of 50 PM10. However, this is not yet a breach of standards, as the city's allowed 1 exceedance a year. Environment Southland air quality scientist Owen Wilson says it's likely there will be more issues this winter as the temperatures drop. There were 23 air quality breaches in Invercargill last winter, and it's hoped there won't be as many this year, but temperatures play a big part in this. Significant rainfall in Milford and Gore over the weekend has been enough to lift water restrictions. Aquifers in the east and southern region have been recharged due to the recent rain in the area, enabling Gore District Council to lift hosing bans. Significant rain at the headwaters of the Milford River has boosted supply, and Gore's main urban water feeds have also been replenished. Cooler weather has reduced water demand, and water restrictions that had been in place for 4 months are now lifted. It was the first total hosing ban imposed in the district in 7 years. A support group for Invercargill grandparents raising grandchildren has seen strong growth since it began last February. When the Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Trust's Invercargill group began, it had 4 families. Now that's risen to 34, with plans to expand into Gore. A workshop in the city today was part of the support being offered to members. Sarah Bedford spoke to Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Field Officer Diana East about the challenges for grandparents.
There's very many challenges, but often the grandchildren are placed with the grandparents at very short notice. You know, lots of examples where they might arrive within just a couple of hours notification. Sometimes even without any clothing. I know of instances where the grandchildren have arrived just in their pyjamas. So a huge change in the grandparents' lives. Some of the grandparents have had to stop working in order to do this, or they've put their retirement plans on hold. For many of them, there's financial challenges. The challenges are huge.
Around the country, how many grandparents are there that are actually raising their grandchildren?
In terms of grandparents themselves, we think about 6,000 that are known to the Trust. Clearly there are many more than that. We're still only touching the tip of the iceberg. We think that there's at least twice that number of grandparents raising grandchildren around the country. Some of them are raising just 1 grandchildren, some are raising multiple grandchildren. So we could be talking about 13,000 grandchildren all up.
Is this a growing number?
Very much so. It's always been there, but it is becoming more common. Part of that is because legislation was passed some years ago, which makes it preferable for children to be placed with grandparents and whānau. So not necessarily always grandparents, they might be aunts or uncles, but to be placed with grandparents and kin carers rather than go into foster care.
Why do you think it's important to have support groups like these?
what's one of the primary mechanisms by which we can support all the grandchildren. People who come to the support groups, often their first reaction is, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. There are other people out there who understand what's going on for me and how it is. So it's by sharing and learning together that they can just feel a whole heap better, able to cope and learn different ways of addressing the issues that they have to address.
So tell me about this workshop. What are you doing?
It's very much a strength-based workshop. What we're doing is identifying the strengths that grandparents draw on when they're raising their grandchildren full-time. We believe that grandparents, if they have these strengths, stronger grandparents make stronger grandchildren. So looking very much at things like resilience.
So why take this out nationally and around the country?
Because GRG Trust, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Trust, really wants to take services and support into the communities where the grandparents are. So by coming to a place like Invercargill, as you can see, we've got a group of local grandparents here participating in the workshop. They can get to know each other, and it also helps strengthen the local support groups.
Stay with us after the break. Why the Reserve Bank is concerned over housing pressures. Welcome back. Housing pressures are increasing risk in the financial system, according to Reserve Bank Governor Graham Wheeler. The Reserve Bank today released its May 2013 Financial Stability Report, with Mr Wheeler saying, while the financial system remains sound, developments in private sector credit and the housing market point to increasing risks to financial stability. He says house prices relative to disposable incomes are already high by international standards, and further escalation will worsen the potential damage that could come from a downturn following an economic or financial shock. Housing pressures are being felt most in Auckland and Christchurch, where supply constraints are greatest. Invercargill City Council began hearing submissions on its 2013-14 draft annual plan today. 407 submissions were made on the plan, with 64 submitters wanting to speak on their submissions over the next 2 days. Among the issues, many submitters wanted to share their views on the fluoridation of water and the development of a skate park on Ellis Road. 5 people will also speak tomorrow on submissions around the Venture South and governance structure proposal. Council will consider submissions before making final decisions and adopting the annual plan on June 11th. Salary and wage rates grew 1.7% in the year to March, although growth eased. That's according to figures from Statistics New Zealand, which include a 0.4% rise in the March quarter. 56% of those surveyed saw pay rate increases in the year to March, with the median increase 2.9%, the lowest in 21 months. Salary and wage rates for the private sector increased 1.8% in the year to March, while public sector rates increased 1.5%. Commenting on the figures, ANZ Bank says the gradual improvement in wage growth seen since early 2010 appears to have levelled off. Bad weather has held up inspections on Milford Road this week, forcing the road to be closed between 5:30 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. Major rockfalls earlier this year resulted in the New Zealand Transport Agency erecting a 60-metre temporary portal to hold back shatter rock as a safety precaution. The current closures are due to safety concerns around potential risks and monitoring existing rockfall. The winter avalanche season means more road closures can be expected between now and November. An extra $1.5 million has been earmarked by government to boost budgeting services across the country. The extra funding is in addition to the existing $8.9 million allocated to 152 budget service providers nationally. Jubilee Budget Advisory Service Manager Simon Tierney says demand for the services remain high, and the extra funding will help the Invercargill-based service to break even.
It's only a short-term measure, it's not a long-term fix. It's just basically to get them through until the Minister will actually review all sort of contracts later in the year.
So potentially what could happen with that?
I guess there's a number of different things. Yes, there could be an increase in funding. They might decide who they allocate the funding to. It may be more smaller organisations, it could be bigger organisations. Any time when it comes around funding, there's always uncertainty.
How many people are you actually funded to see through this office?
In each 12 months, we're funded to see 250 new clients. We see twice that number, and sometimes it's even more. We do a lot of education work as well, and we have a lot of clients that we see, for a long term. Not everyone can come in and see us for a couple of 3 appointments and be okay. Some people that we are working for the long term. And while the goal is to have people independent, some we do have to work for a lot longer than others.
So where's the rest of the money coming from for the other 250 clients?
Yeah, that's a good point. Luckily, we are blessed with the likes of the Community Trust and other community organisations that see that there is a need in Southland and are happy to sort of help support us by funding that shortfall, and that's vital. But like any of the community organisations too, they're under the same pressure of funding. I know a lot of them are sort of looking at reducing funding to the community as well. So that's always a wee bit of a concern. We have a couple of options. We could limit the number of people we see, but I don't think that's the right outcome. That's not going to bring good benefits to our people.
Is there an expectation, do you think, that you will get community funding for the extra clients that you see, and perhaps it's obviously different around the country for different areas that don't have access to that?
I think the government expect the difference to be made up by local funders. Local funders expect the difference to be made up by the government. So it's really who wants to pay first or who wants to actually front up.
There's still a growing need for the services here.
Yeah, I think our numbers will actually slightly drop this year compared to next, and that sounds really positive. The flip side to that is what we are seeing is a lot more complex, more involved cases as well. It's not just a simple budget and sending people out the door. We're seeing a lot of sort of, just I guess a wee bit of that fallout from the recession. People are still carrying, a number of multiple debts, more complex debts. We're seeing more complex issues. So yeah, the work we're doing. It almost seems to be taking longer with each client. We're not able to get that quick appointment, sort them out in a few appointments and send them away. We're working with them for a lot longer on more complex issues.
And that's it from news coming up on sport. Sharks basketball action from the weekend from the news team. Good night.